Well, tell the fine folks what we're going to be talking about.
Today we are speaking with Mr. Mark Kingwell, who is a professor of philosophy.
Philosophy?
Philosophy.
A philosophy bag?
This is the AT Banter podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot. Joining me today, as usual, Mr. Steve Barclay.
Hello there.
And Mr. Ryan Fleury. Is that a dolphin?
It's a robot.
Oh.
Really? A robotic dolphin, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Because that sounded a bit like R2-D2 had been swallowed by a large
I didn't know what
aquatic
was
mammal.
happening there.
All right, there you go.
Oh, that's good. That's, yeah. Well, that's a foreshadowing of what we're going to be talking about today, isn't it, Mr. Ryan?
It is indeed.
What are we doing today, Mr. Ryan?
Today we are talking with Mark Kingwell, who is a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto. This
is going to be fun. This is really going to be. I've been looking forward to this since you put it on the schedule.
Excellent.
It's so. What topic are we going to be talking about, Ryan?
Ethics and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Could go deep.
Finally, we'll get some intelligence on this show.
That's right.
Yeah, he's
and not from Google or Alexa.
Yeah, really. They're the enemy. No, this is going to be. This is an interesting. It's always. I find it's always interesting to take sort of counter positions to things and talk about sort of the other side of issues. I mean, it's kind of weird. We're an assistive technology with the emphasis on technology podcast. Today is going to be a little different. We're going to be sort of breaking down technology and talking a little bit about some of the implications behind some of the technology that's coming forward and what, as humans, how we should be reacting to it and how we should be maybe taking a bit of a better look at how it's being developed. So, very philosophical show today. No fart jokes or, well, maybe one. No cowbell. We haven't even had a cowbell yet.
No.
What? No cowbell?
And Ryan took the stick.
No, it should be on the floor beside the table there, where it was.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Well, that's the jingle.
That's the jingle stick.
No, forget it.
Well, that'll work. All right. You get two for the
two for one.
It's like using a
jingle bell.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Bing bong.
Hello.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Is that Ryan?
It is Ryan.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay. Well, let us launch into it. It's a pretty heady topic. What got you into, in the first place? What got you interested in ethics and AI?
Well, I'm not sure a lot of people realize that philosophers have actually been talking about consciousness of non-human agents for a long time. This goes back to the 1970s, and you could even argue it goes back to Descartes in the 1640s. But in the 1970s and 80s, a lot of philosophers were talking about what it might look like to have a fully conscious, non-human, non-carbon-based entity, and what the criteria might be for assessing the consciousness of such a thing. Would it need to have a body, for example? Would it need to have the ability to move through an environment? These are questions that philosophers have been dwelling on for some decades now. So the recent flurry of interest in AI has really just revived a long-standing philosophical interest for some of us who work in this area. And for me especially, it was my association with the Ethics Center here at the University of Toronto and thinking about the ethical and political issues associated with that question. So there are metaphysical issues, obviously, the nature of the status of entities. But I'm especially interested in rights, responsibilities, exploitation, and especially through the cultural history of those things. So, Capix RUR, for example, where the word robot is first introduced into the lexicon, which is really a kind of fable of exploitation of workers, is now a reality, not just for humans under communism, but possibly in the near future for AIs under human rule. So that's my interest. I'm a political theorist by training, but I have these metaphysical sidelines that come to the fore with new urgency right now.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say that. I was like, it must feel like now more than ever at any other point, it really feels like we really are on the cusp of having to deal with some of these ethical issues of AI, because it looks like we're real close to actually developing something that we can point to and say, yeah, that's AI of science fiction of the 50s.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the speculation often runs ahead of the technical realities, and so does the cultural stuff. So, we're all familiar with the different versions of AIs becoming conscious in positive and mostly negative forms. The Terminator franchise, the reboot of Battlestar Galactica, all of these Westworld, all of these instances of our imagination trying to grapple with what it might look like to confront a non-human entity that's conscious and purposeful and possibly violent and bent on our subjugation. In fact, now that the technical realities are much closer to, although not yet at, the point where we could imagine confronting or having to deal with a non-human conscious entity. It's everyone's talking about it, and from everything, you guys know this, everything from, say, medical technologies, diagnostics, self-driving cars, self-landing planes, to things like the Internet of Things, where you have conscious or semi-conscious, apparently, entities inside your home who are directing your everyday life.
Are you talking about the American president?
Yeah.
And we're in politics.
I guess the jury's still out on whether he counts as a conscious entity or not. But yes, I mean, for the first time ever, really, in the history of humankind, we are, at or near what people call the singularity, the point at which there might be not only non-carbon-based conscious beings, but maybe ones that are smarter and more powerful than we are. And I think, for me, this is very exciting because it throws it back on us as a question of what it means to be human, whether that's distinctive in any way. And if it's not, in what ways is it not? Are we into a transhuman future, post-human? Will there be a kind of cyborg future? We're already cyborgs in many ways now. I think the technical realities have kind of almost caught up to the speculation. And I think that's why people feel this so acutely right now.
Are we even really prepared to identify a non-human intelligence? Like there's been talk for years about, say, dolphins and whales, for example, having a high level of intelligence, but because they're non-human, I think we don't necessarily have the tools to say just how intelligent they are.
Yeah, that raises a really interesting point, because I think we have not really confronted the non-human yet carbon-based consciousnesses that might be out there, like advanced mammals and other forms of life. There's a debate right now, I don't know if you guys are following this, but there's a debate about whether plants and other kinds of animals, non-animal forms rather, are conscious, flora, not fauna.
Yeah.
I don't think we really know what consciousness is. I think that's the philosophical mystery at the heart of this. And what's fascinating to me is, the uncanniness of encountering the other. So we take for granted that we recognize conscious others when we go out on the street, say, or we get into a subway car, or I don't know, wherever it is, go to a workplace. You see these other beings that resemble you, and they act the way that you do, and you kind of assume that they're conscious in the same way that you are. But I mentioned Descartes a few minutes ago. I mean, the Cartesian hangover is, centuries later, we still don't really know if another entity is conscious in the way that we are, because we don't have access to their consciousness. We're dealing with the phenomenology of their presence in the world. And we're layering that over with all kinds of expectations and the premises that we assume. This is why we find it so hard to recognize the possibility of others, of other kinds of beings having consciousness. So, for example, I mean, the biggest barrier for many people is language. You mentioned dolphins. Dolphins certainly have language, but the language that they have, certainly to me, it seems, the language they have is not recognizable to us or translatable to us as language. So we're sort of struggling with that. The test case on the other side, of course, would be the uncanniness of an entity that isn't carbon-based but looks exactly like us and acts and talks exactly like us. We wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That's the Cylon paradox, right? And the kind of endgame version of that is, this is a spoiler for any of your listeners who haven't watched Battlestar Galactica, but or Blade Runner, the Deckard or the Boomer character who is a non-human entity but doesn't know that it's a non-human entity, and that at that point all bets are off, because it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, I take it that I'm carbon-based. I'm pretty sure I am, and I'm pretty sure I'm conscious, but I wouldn't know if I wasn't, and I wouldn't know if you guys weren't. I mean, not just because we're talking on the phone or whatever, but even if I met you in person, there's a kind of vanishing point where we can't tell the difference. So all of this is really, I think, philosophically fascinating, but it's also politically very weighted, and we're still catching up with. We put it in context. We're still catching up with granting different kinds of entities that are very, very like the mainstream or the big bulge in the normal distribution, and giving them rights. So it's not, you have to remind yourself, it's not that long ago that women didn't have certain rights, or that black men or black women didn't have certain rights. We're still catching up. People with non-standard human bodies, for example. If they have so-called disabilities, we're very bad at this, actually, because we tend to cluster towards the middle of the normal distribution.
Yeah, and doesn't it seem like I know a lot of people have sort of gone on record to be very cautious about AI, and from an outside point of view, it seems to me we haven't even figured this stuff out with ourselves, and here we are, we're trying to create it artificially. That to some people might seem really foolish.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the caution that people are feeling. On the other hand, there's a total lack of caution about certain things. So, I mentioned IoT earlier. People are allowing very, very powerful AIs into their homes already, in fridges or televisions or Alexa.
Right.
And they don't seem to have any trouble with that. And then the very same people often turn around and say, well, I mean, obviously we can't have robots with rights. Well, you just gave away a huge amount of your privacy 5 minutes ago to this AI, which, by the way, is deployed for and serves a huge corporation that is gathering your data 24 hours a day.
Right.
So I think people are cautious about the wrong thing sometimes. I'm far less worried about our possible future fellow citizens being non-carbon based than I am about technologies that come into my inner space and exploit me for profit to big data mining corporations. I think people have the wrong political focus. And that's part of what I'm arguing these days is, let's get the focus on the right things.
Yeah.
So that we can, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, because it really seems to me that people are becoming sort of climatized to, in small increments to all these things. Because like you said, 5 years ago, digital assistants like Google Home and Alexa, they weren't around, and it would almost seem outrageous if you had explained what they were 10 years ago, say. But now they're so common. And so people are sort of slowly being, climatized to the notion of AI, that they're not having these concerns or these discussions. Does as an ethicist, does that concern you?
Yeah, very much so. And part of it is rooted in what I think is a persistent failure to understand the nature of our relationship to technology. And on this question, I guess I'm a little old-fashioned. I align myself with people like Martin Heidegger and Jacques Ellul and even Marshall McLuhan. We don't understand the technologies that we embrace because they come to us in seductive forms, in the form of that old saying that the first generation of a technology looks like magic, and then the second generation looks like something that we've always had and we take it for granted. And both of those moments are seductive, right, in their different ways. And meanwhile, one of the greatest and most pernicious myths about technology is that it's neutral. That somehow, Twitter, it could be used for good or it could be used for ill. That's not the point about Twitter. The point about Twitter is that it has inbuilt tendencies, just like any technology does, that have to be recognized and highlighted so that you don't fall into error when you use it. This is an example that comes from my friend Rushkoff, who says, a handgun, can be used as a paperweight. But obviously that's not the way the technology is intended to be used. So the purpose of the technology, the way the technology has been built, is not neutral. And it's not a question of whether, you kill a good guy or a bad guy. The whole purpose of a handgun is to kill people. Right. And you could say the same thing on the flip side of a pillow. You can use a pillow to kill somebody, but that's not what the pillow is for. Pillow's, purpose, its technological end purpose or final cause is to rest one's head. So these things can be perverted, but we have to notice that they are actually created with certain kinds of parameters and tendencies built into them. And I think this is what people constantly miss about technology when they resort to the language of neutrality. Well, it could be this or it could be that. No, a tool is a tool because it was built for a certain kind of activity. And, somebody like we mentioned, the current president of the United States, he understands the nature of Twitter very well. He's actually a technologically savvy person because he understands that the whole point of Twitter is to do what he's doing with it, which is to foment a certain kind of reactive news cycle and reaction discourse that's truncated and bizarre to the eyes of somebody like me, who would like there to be a much more robust public sphere, and so on and so on. I guess I feel like maybe I'm wandering a little bit from the topic, but the point is that people really don't have a clear idea of the technologies they use, and they fall into certain patterns because they're convenient or easy, and they resist other patterns that might actually be better, partly because their views on technology are unclear.
Now, do you see it problematic that, say, like, I don't know what, like, say over the past 50 years, technology has started to advance at such a rate that we're not really able to really grasp the implications of the technology before it's already common in common usage. Do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, that has certainly been true at least since the end of the Second World War, when you had these mega corporations who started driving and not just the corporations themselves creating the technologies, but their constellations of interests, including think tanks and pundits and writers, some of whom were not necessarily associated directly with them, but were just part of the rhetoric of progress and inevitability, technological inevitability. So yes, in the last, let's call it, I mean, it's, what is it, 50 years, 60 years, this has absolutely accelerated. There's no question. And the ordinary person who kind of wakes up every day and turns on a screen or you know, carries their phone around with them all day, every day. I just read a statistic, 95% of North American teenagers have a phone. That's a staggering statistic when you think about the range of socioeconomic distribution. That even teenagers in, you know, objectively poor homes have access to smartphone technology all the time. That changes your relationship to the world. That is a new kind of being in the world that didn't exist with the smartphones 10 years ago. And so yes, this keeps happening very, very quickly, and it answers to certain kinds of needs and desires. And I would go further. I'd say certain kinds of addictive tendencies. And people are very, very poor at having self-reflective attitudes with respect to their own desires, and especially with respect to their own addictive tendencies. We're all addicts, really, at heart. I mean, the human brain is an addictive, sponge, and certain kinds of things play into it. And people who are designing apps and programs and certain kinds of interfaces, they know this very well. I mean, that's what they're paid to do, is to play to our addictive tendencies.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems to me like, and you don't, on the one hand, you don't want to seem alarmist, but at the same time, when they developed the 8-track, I mean, that was a pretty innocuous technological advance that didn't really go anywhere. I mean, that's pretty harmless. But something like smartphones, that's almost a game changer, and certainly AI is a definite game changer. I mean, eventually, do you think that are we eventually going to have this bite us in the ass, where we're just going to develop something and release it and just be like, hey, like we'll figure it out down the road, and it is really going to shake our foundations?
Well, that's one version of the nightmare scenario, isn't it? It's one of the ones that you see, or at least some variant thereof, in the movies, right? So. We developed Skynet as, I forget what the original purpose of Skynet was supposed to be, but it was supposed to be good. So Skynet was supposed to protect us, I suppose, or make our lives easier, and then it became conscious and tyrannical. That's the nightmare scenario. I think much more proximate is going to be something like the smartphone, where we become dependent upon certain kinds of applications and interfaces. And we can no longer go back to a point where we are independent of them. The one less nightmarish version of this is in Wall-E, the Pixar movie, where the off-world planet with the humans on it, the off-world spaceship with the humans on it, have become so dependent on technology that they just live in these kind of super recliners and are massive overweight and playing games all the time.
Yep.
That and eating, that seems like, well, we're almost there.
Yeah. Rob and I just exchanged glances. That's kind of our utopian future.
Yeah, that's not like I'm trying to get into the Matrix. I want to get into one of those pods where I just get fed, and I'm in this nice warm liquid, and I'm in that egg. Like, put me there.
Yeah, well, as long as I have Halo, I might do it too. But the base of the core of your question is the one that we should be thinking of, which is, what do we want human life to look like? I don't think it's wrong to be alarmist. I call myself quite happily a neo-Luddite, not because I want to destroy technology. I'm not that kind of Luddite, but just in the sense that I think to be very very, very clear in our minds about what we want from our relationship with these kinds of tools that we're creating. And I think it's too fast for a lot of people to even have any reflection about it. And by the way, I should go back to an earlier point. It's not just that it's too fast for individuals, but that there are forces of cultural rhetoric that are pushing. I just saw an interview with Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and he was talking about how he thought it would be, quote, irresponsible for some people to resist signing up for different versions of Amazon Prime or Prime Now, these new shorter timeline, drone-based forms of consumer delivery. Irresponsible. That's kind of an outrageous claim. I mean, that's a fascistic claim.
Yeah.
That it's not even up to you anymore. Jeff Bezos says it's irresponsible for you not to be part of his world dominating consumer retail model.
Yeah, if you think about it, there really is no sort of governance on any of this. Like, anybody can develop a technology as fast as they want. No one's taking the time, really. Everyone wants to be the new kid on the block that develops the new cutting edge technology that's going to revolutionize something. And they just develop it without really looking down the line and looking at the implications of that.
Yeah, and again, once more, I should say, as a political theorist, this alarms me because if you listen to the rhetoric of not just Bezos, but people like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk, or any these self-appointed prophets and demigods of Silicon Valley, they don't care about democratic regulation. They actually see themselves as already post-governmental or post-national. And it's true. I mean, most of their assets have been offloaded out of the tax reach of any national entity. And they're thinking likewise. I mean, they think that they're speaking directly to a consumer mass, which has no necessary connection to any sort of national regulation. Now, you can argue, maybe the nation state is over. But one thing you have to say for the nation state is that it has been the most reliable regulator of rights and responsibilities that humans have developed over time. And if we're going to a post-national reality, I think we should about much more so, say, than killer robots, because it means that we're no longer going to be beholden to each other as fellow citizens. And once we break that tie, it's already a kind of winner-take-all economy. Once we break the national tie of citizenship and the tax base and redistributive forms of income control and legal regulation, all bets are off, seems to me. So, as a political reality, that's much more proximate than, the Terminator, for example.
So do you think the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a killer robot is a good guy with a killer robot?
All I know is that I want my Robbie the robot by my side, just like Walter Pidgeon in that movie, Forbidden Planet.
Right.
Because he's not only a manservant, but also a bodyguard. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want that.
I'll take mine as Daryl Hannah from Blade Runner. Oh, dear. So let me ask you this. Who's looking at the big picture, if anybody? I mean, are people like you, are these the only people that are sort of looking down the road and going, okay, well, you know what? Self-driving cars are cool and neat, but what about something 10 years down the road? I mean, a self-driving car is a good example because nobody really thinks about all the implications of something like a self-driving car would actually have on the infrastructure of an average city.
Yeah, well, I do think, and maybe this is unfortunate or just the reality, but it is people like me who are thinking about these things, and we tend to do it in seminar rooms and scholarly journals. I have long been convinced, however, that there is a strong trickle-down effect when it comes to things like this. I wouldn't do political theory otherwise. If you look at the classics of political thinking, even recent classics, say John Rawls's Theory of Justice from 1970, had a huge impact on American society in terms of how to actually justify and defend a tax regime, for example, or a rights regime. So philosophers, we seem to toil in isolation and obscurity, but actually one hopes at least that the cumulative effort is not without some kind of effect. But I also I get the impression that the debate is lively everywhere, and people are thinking and talking about this when they're not, just preoccupied with their Twitter feeds or posting things on Instagram. I think that there's a lot of anxiety, and the anxiety itself is an expression of wanting to have, and in fact, maybe having at different levels a conversation about what's happening and what might happen. In terms of actual political regulation or where the rubber meets the road, I don't see a lot of that yet, but I do know that there's a lot of interest, and I guess we'll have to see. The fact is, though, what you said is true, that things that are cool, neat technology, they're going to be in place before we fully understand them or fully regulate them, and then we're going to be playing. But that's been true for a long time. So that probably isn't going to change. If anything, it's just going to get a little bit harder. But I suppose I have a reasonable amount of faith in our ability not only to innovate and come up with kind of interesting new things, new toys, but also our ability sometimes to say, oh yeah, hang on a second, that actually isn't so cool. To have, say, my in-house technology recording conversations and randomly distributing it to other people. I don't want that.
Well, it's funny. I think one recent example of that is at Google I/O, last month, where they demonstrated that duplex technology, where they had the digital assistant phone to make a hair appointment. I'm not sure if you saw that, but very, very creepy. I mean, it was really able to mimic a human. Like the person on the other line really had no idea that they were actually talking to the Google Assistant.
Although I did read that was probably faked for the sake of the rollout of.
Oh, is that right? Well, I hope so.
Yeah. But your point is still well taken, which is that the more sophisticated we get with these things, the more likely they are to be indistinguishable, and that goes back to a point I made before. I mean, if an AI calls up a restaurant or a hair salon and sounds exactly like a human, what's the difference? That is just what we want from our technology. We want it to be effective in just that way. That particular doesn't upset me that much, because I figure that must be a fairly straightforward, I mean, I'm not a programmer, but fairly straightforward algorithm to write to introduce little ticks and hems and haws and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I took away from that whole episode more so was the fact that demonstration got a bit of blowback. People didn't like it. They didn't really embrace it like the way I think Google was hoping. Didn't quite get the universal adulation that they thought it would. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, it gave me a little bit of hope that there's still people out there that are just like, whoa, hey, hold on now. Like, I don't want to have a robot calling me and not being able to tell the difference between that and a human. Like, there's still some anxiety there that I think is good. I think that's healthy as a society, that, we can maybe put the brakes on some of this stuff, until we really think it through. Yeah.
Well, I agree that that the signs, at least, of anxiety are indicative that people are many, if not most people, are not quite ready for a fully integrated post-human world. And if you want to talk about the uncanny valley on the inside, coming into artificial intelligence, right? Where something that resembles but is still clearly non-human is less creepy than something that is starting to be indistinguishable from the human. That's the uncanny valley, right? That when something looks almost like a human to the point where we're not sure, that's what freaks us out.
Right.
And then you could argue that there's an outside or far side uncanny valley when we're not even sure what we are to our. And I think we're right in the sort of uncanny sweet spot right now. We don't know where we're coming or where we're going, and that, I mean, again, philosophically, that's fascinating to me. But I understand that it produces a lot of anxiety. The anxiety itself is a symptom of the deep philosophical interest.
I mean, yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that I was reading an article the other day where they were talking about Adobe has this software suite that can literally it can take voice samples from somebody. If you have enough voice samples, it's able to dissect it into every syllable, and you can actually program it to, if you have enough samples of a voice, to literally make that voice say anything, and it's indistinguishable from the actual voice. I think you can identify it forensically, but certainly not to the human ear. So I mean, you could take something like Obama. You'd have enough clips of him, feed it into this program, and you could literally just type out anything, and it would just say it in Obama's voice.
Right.
And similar the video editing software is getting to that point too, where you talk about the uncanny valley and not being able to distinguish with the human eye how good CG or digital representations of people are. Again, I mean, I feel like that's technology that we're not thinking about the far-reaching implications of having that.
No, that's true. And as you say, I mean, this is not technology that's 5 years out or 10 years out. We've already got it.
Yeah,
it's here. Yeah. So you're quite right. And I guess this sort of circles back to the same point. Where and how do we have the conversation where we think about the implications of these technologies? And I think one of the things that just is the case is that there is a conversation happening, but it's diffused or decentralized. And one of the things that I guess, what you guys are doing with the podcast and what I'm trying to do with my research and other people are doing with discourse is try to gather the threads together and make sure that there is a kind of gravitas to this conversation, so that people don't just go off into their private nightmares, but actually the resources are there to think through things in a clear and rigorous way, so that we can at least be honest with ourselves about what the implications are, and also I guess not give into this idea that somehow it's all happening to us no matter what. That's this ideology of technological inevitability, which I find despicable, that somehow, it's happening, so you have to just shut up and go with it. No matter what you say, you're just trying to turn the clock back or blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. Technology is something that humans have created, and we may not always be in control of it once it's created, but we have the ability at least to think about what we've done and what we might do. And it's a bit like markets. People say, the market has a mind of its own, and the market wants this or the market wants that. No, markets are made of people and desires and decisions. So there are things that can be done. It's not something that is happening to us. It's something that's happening because of what we have decided and chosen. And that point in itself, I think, is worth making again and again.
So do you sort of see the development of AI as being sort of the 21st century version of, say, the Industrial Revolution, where just everything after it was just a game changer, and just everything about our society is just going to change because of it?
Yeah, I do think so. And in fact, I would say if you want to pursue that analogy, we're already post-industrial, or whatever you want, whatever the terminology should be. It would be as if we were having this conversation 20 years after the steam engine was invented or something like that. The implications are still kind of raining down on us. But, again, go back to that statistic about the smartphones, or the fact that in most homes in North America and Europe, there are probably, that would at least 2 or 3 screens. So we've actually turned the corner on this. Yes, it absolutely is a game changer. In fact, in future generations, I think we'll be able to see that it's much more disruptive than the Industrial Revolution was, and for good and ill. And so, yeah, that's without question, seems to me. The amount of time that people spend interacting with their screens, whether they're handheld or on a desk or on their laps, the way that changes how they do things in the world. Right now we're shaking out a few things, and there are bigger changes still to come, it seems to me. But the big change was basically bringing the computer inside the house, and that happened some time ago.
Right. So, in your opinion, what can we do going forward to sort of mitigate some of this, perceived risk? What would you like to see us do as a society, with technology to sort of make it less, what's the word I'm looking for?
Dangerous?
Sure.
Dangerous. Well, I guess, again, I'm going to sound like the sort of, I'm not that old, but I know I sound kind of old when I say stuff like this. But read, reflect, go on a diet now and then. I think I have a Twitter handle, and I've tweeted exactly 0 times, which I think is kind of cool. So create a Twitter handle, but don't tweet. That's what I call the Bartleby option. I would prefer not to. And you hear people talk about quitting Twitter. Roseanne Barr said she's quitting Twitter after she lost her job for racist tweets, and then she was back on Twitter within hours.
Yeah, that's right.
Just pay attention to your addictive tendencies. I mean, like I said, we're all addicts. I mean, humans are actually hardwired to be addictive. And most people don't want to confront that, but we really are. And it doesn't have to do necessarily with, alcohol or drugs or a cigarette. So pay attention to that, and, read more Heidegger.
Spend some time outside.
And you know what? I think the other thing is talk to your friends. Like, talk to people about what you think you want the future to look like. And that the future isn't something that just happens. It's something that we create. We don't have this in English, but in French, there are 2 different words that translate as future, la future and l'avenir. And la future is that's kind of like the English version of the future, right? It's just this thing, this bulldozer of things that are going to happen no matter what. But l'avenir is, what is to come. And there's a much more open-ended connotation that the future isn't, this thing that stands over against us in a kind of debilitating way, a way that takes away our power. The future is something that we create, and we do it together. So I guess that's what I would like to say to people is, we're creating the future. It's not something that's being dictated to us by anything or anyone. It's certainly not, powerful corporations who want to. We can push back on that.
Wasn't it? What's the line from Terminator 2? The future is what we make it.
I think it's fate.
Fate. That's right.
Yeah. Which is in a way the same thing, because fate is an even stronger kind of normally understood as something that ties your hands. Yeah, fate is what we make. Yeah,
excellent.
Which I think is a quotation from I forget, some German philosopher. I should know that, but my Terminator scholarship needs a little honing.
I know. Yeah, we really need to. We need to learn more from the Terminator franchise. Really, I think that anyone developing AI, we should just make them. If you're a developer, you have to watch all 3 movies. Yeah, we'll even make them watch the terrible 4th one.
To be honest, I kind of feel bad for the first AI that actually gets out to the world and gets to have a good look at it, because it's going to have probably been created with all of these rules and all of these ethics, and then it's going to get out and it's going to see the average Joe Blow human out in the world, and it'll probably run into immediately some guy going, "The Earth is flat." It's like, no, it's not. It's clearly not. It'll spend 2.5 days banging its head against the wall with some guy going, "No, it's flat," before it finally realizes there's a large portion of the human population that's completely delusional. Ergo, it must be okay to be delusional.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Man.
And what would an AI's delusions be?
That's scary. Well, wow, that opens up a whole new.
We'll bring Mark on again to talk about that. Yeah,
that's a whole other podcast. Listen, yeah, it was fascinating talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but we should let you go.
Well, thank you. And yes, I believe we could. And by the way, on the last point, I'm pretty sure that probably, there is this AI from Saudi Arabia called Sophia, who is the first AI with citizenship. Although it's a bit of a publicity stunt by the Saudis. Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure that the first functional AI in the human-like guise is probably going to be a sex robot. So
sure, obviously, clearly, yeah. We know what drives technology, and that's yeah. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
So it's another one of our problems as humans. We're not too smart when it comes to genitalia.
Yeah, that's why I always snicker whenever people tell me that the internet is about cats. No, it's not.
I guarantee you, I know what the first picture ever sent digitally was, and it wasn't a cat. Oh boy! All right, thanks, Mark. Before we let you go, is there anything at all that you want to plug? Anything at all?
I've got a bunch of talks on this topic coming up in different places. I'm going to Stockholm in a couple of weeks and Hong Kong in the fall. But the main thing is maybe I have a book coming out called The Interface, which is specifically about these ideas about addiction and our relationship to screens and interfaces. And that should be out early next year. So if people want to keep an eye out for that, that would be great.
Awesome.
Do you have a website that we can link people to?
No.
He doesn't have a smartphone. He's not going to have a website.
I have a flip phone and like a one-line bio. So that's kind of my online presence.
We can link to you on Wikipedia as well. I think you've got a wiki page there.
I have a faculty page at the U of T philosophy department. So that's probably the one place to go.
We'll just let people know if anyone wants to contact him, don't leave him alone. He doesn't want to talk to you. All right. Thanks, Mark. It's been a pleasure as always. And let's have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, we really could have gone down the rabbit hole with that one.
Wow, eh? Well, he's got so much information and knowledge that he can talk on, right? So.
Oh, that was so fun.
Yeah, I mean the number of topics that we could hit on, self-driving cars, robotic replacement guide animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was. I kind of feel bad that we didn't really get to more.
Well, the whole political side of things as well. We never touched on.
No, because it's a huge topic. And I mean, the ethics concerns about all this stuff is, for any given technology, I mean, there are ethic concerns about it. So I don't know. If anything, that was a good starting point. I think we should have him on again for sure. And we can maybe dive into a specific topic with him and talk specifically, say, about the idea of ethics and even assistive technology, because I would clump the idea of service robots or assisted living robots that we talked about back in the robotics episode. All that I would lump in with assistive technology. So we could talk about the ethics concerns about that next time. But holy cow, that was fascinating. Love it.
And did you notice that he referred to Deckard as a replicant?
I did. I didn't want to call him on that because I thought it's rude to call out the. Obviously, you've been listening to interviews with Ridley Scott, but we know he's lost his mind, so that doesn't count. I'm not convinced that Deckard's a replicant, but you get points for Battlestar Galactica references. So
that's true. Yeah. Anybody who can bring up Cylons as an example, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I want to talk to that guy. So,
but particularly if you can link us up with Trish Helfer.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a great conversation for us. I don't know if it's going to be. I don't know how interesting it will be to our listeners, but
no, I think there's a lot of food for thought in that conversation, and I think it may allow some people to just step back for a moment, think about the conversation, and go, wow, maybe I do need to unplug a little bit more often, and I maybe turn my artificial assistants off when I'm not using them.
It's not even. I don't. And even,
that's just the starting point, right? There's so much deeper than that.
It is. I think the real core of it is that we need to maybe slow down a little bit in how fast this technology gets developed, because it really is like a foot race. Like these guys are
well, it is. Microsoft
trying to come
wants
up
to beat Google. Amazon wants to beat everybody else. Apple has their WDC developers conference going on right now,
right? And
I'm sure there's AI announcements happening there. They all want to be the first to the plate, right? So.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Again, nobody who, I guess my question for him that he sort of answered, but that's concerning for me, because philosophers should not be the only ones thinking about this stuff. Like, it should actually be the developers. I mean, if you're developing a technology, like I would think that it's up to you to actually think about.
Well, you can go back on our previous conversations we've had, talking about the Facebook developers, the engineers who knew they were creating a dopamine process, right?
Well, sure. I mean, right. That's intentional, though. Yes. I mean, that's the blowback that they're getting from.
And that's what he mentioned. These developers know that some of these apps will be addictive, and that's their whole reasoning for developing these, right? They know it's going to gain attention by the populace.
Right. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, we're not even creating, innocuous technology. We're actually creating harmful technology just in order to be the top app downloaded, just for the bucks.
Oh, money.
I mean, I don't want to be really super cynical. I don't want to bum everybody out, but let's be honest. It's kind of like that. But the bright side of that is that they're starting to get blowback. Mm-hmm. Same thing with all the data stuff, like the new GRPD. The new.
If you look at it though, just from a addiction perspective, there's lots of technologies that have been built to feed our addictions. We can look at alcohol, for example.
Sure.
Now, I have probably threatened to quit Facebook more times than I've threatened to quit alcohol. But
priorities.
But I haven't quit either.
But I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with that. I don't think alcohol was created to be addictive. I think just some guy accidentally drank grape juice that went bad, felt awesome, and was like, Frank, come here, you gotta try this. And he's like, that's spoiled. No, just drink it. It's gonna be awesome. and there you go. And it was born. I mean, I don't know if they went out of their way to actually create something that was addictive. So might not be the best example. But no, I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, television, slot machines.
No, he mentioned, bringing computers into the home.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just screen time in general.
Yep.
I got 2 kids who are, when they're home, they're pretty much full time watching Netflix or Crave or some sort of streaming media.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I probably, if we were to look at a historical example, the day that mass media was born, the radio probably, they were actively thinking about how can we get people to listen to our station. And then from there it went from TV, and now we just have, streaming options, TV, radio, satellite radio,
Podcasts.
Like
our podcast.
Like our podcast, people.
All right. So the takeaway from today's podcast is everybody go outside and get some fresh air. Put down the phone.
Oh my God.
Step away from the Google Home.
Go for a walk.
Now I feel bad. I hear I'm holding 2 phones in my hand. It's just like, oh no. One of us.
Can we wrap this up? I got to check Facebook.
Yeah, that's right. Oh dear. Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
As usual, atbanter.com.
Don't go there. It's a trap. Don't follow us on Facebook.
We want your information.
I was going to say his Twitter account sounds a lot like our Instagram account.
Yeah,
it's
probably.
Just like it's a name and that's it. Hey, people can also email us if they so desire. atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you follow through, you can avoid joining us on Facebook and you can avoid joining us on Twitter.
And hey, where can people find Canadian Assistive Technology there, Steve?
Canadian Assistive Technology can be found by the old-fashioned telephone, but also online at www.chaos. No, that's Rick.
What?
At Robot Overlords.
All right, let's try that again. Okay, let's see. Canadian Assistive Technology can be found at www.canastech.com.
And what about Chaos Technical Services, our buddy Rick?
Our good buddy Rick can also be found by the good old-fashioned telephone, but if you insist on turning on a screen again, www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Wonderful. Well, that says all about. I don't know. Now I'm bummed out. I'm kind of.
I just didn't get a clear answer for when we can expect our robotic overlords.
Soon.
Hopefully. I'm thinking about that Matrix pod. That would be so great.
Oh yeah,
I would love to just crawl into my Matrix pod tonight and just plug in and
learn kung fu.
Honestly, what's the downside to that?
There is no downside.
That's really where we're going. That was always my problem with the Matrix movies. I'd be the guy like, get me back in the pod. What did you take me out for? Like, what are you thinking? I mean, really, that's
the world's
ideal.
Horrible out here.
Yeah, it sucks.
So
nice and warm.
I'm a battery. I don't care.
It's like taking a warm bath. It was
I'm a battery with a medium rare steak.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Anyways, all right, everybody. That's it for us this week. We will see everybody back in the Matrix next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canastech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.